DocTalk was brought to you by Multimin USA, manufacturers of Multimin 90, sure trace mineral supplementation by timed injection.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Dan Thompson here from the College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University. And due to the increased interest in mycotoxins in feed, we're going to replay the episode with Dr. Dion Funder-Merva, who's a toxicologist here at Kansas State University's Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. Sure glad you joined us.
The year that we administered Multimin to the heifer's calves, we discovered that those cattle were able to, they were just a lot healthier cattle. And we just did not experience the scour problem or other problems too. It just seemed like they were a lot healthier cattle. Well, we sure feel that Multimin has been a real value to this ranch.
This segment is brought to you by Double D Family Mat Shop. Injured livestock could mean injured profits. Protect yours with no-slip mats from Double D Family Mat Shop.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Funder-Merva.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
It's great to have you here, and appreciate all that you do here at K-State and for the producers of the state of Kansas. This drought of 2012 has been hard on a lot of people, a lot of animals, and as you know, a lot of plants.
Right, that's for sure. We've been seeing a lot of problems related to the drought in terms of toxicology. As you know, drought brings out certain things that you don't normally see in a summer.
Right.
And lots of that is related to the stress that it places on plants. So plants, when they start to suffer, they might produce different things. They might be vulnerable to certain conditions, such as fungal attack, for example. And those things can lead to secondary poisoning, then affecting animals.
Yeah, and it's, you know, when you look out into a field and you see the good plants are not making it and the weeds are,
right.
That's another issue that we can have during the drought.
Yes, and that's actually a very significant issue in times of drought. You know, a lot of these poisonous plants are out there every year. They grow in a drought year as well as in a normal year. But in a normal year, you typically don't see poisoning because the animals have a choice. They tend to select the good ones, yeah. Once you have drought conditions and you don't have adequate production of the good forage plants, animals sometimes are forced to eat whatever they can find. And if that's a poisonous plant, then you have problems.
Well, this year, you know, specifically, we've seen a lot of issues, but what are some of the poisonous plants that people really, that you've been seeing more cases or hearing of problems this year?
Well, one of the cases that we had that was quite significant was a type of plant called senecio or senecio. It's a little smallish plant. It looks like brush typically in a field. It produces little yellow flowers. And those plants, you know, again, it's something that's always there, but animals tend to avoid them because it contains an alkaloid, and alkaloids are bitter, and animals can detect that. So this year, though, most animals did not have, especially in some areas, did not have enough normal grass, normal fodder to eat. So they were forced to consume that, even though it is bitter. And the consequence of that were outbreaks of poisoning in animals, particularly cattle were affected. It causes significant effects on the liver. So liver failure was a consequence. It causes traumatic production loss as well as death in animals that consume too much of it.
So not only not having the nutrition, but having these toxic plants and,
right.
And getting out and identifying them and probably supplementing to avoid them eating them.
Right, and then another significant problem is accumulation of toxins.
Well, it's time for us to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about those toxins. You're watching DocTalk, and we're sure glad you joined us.
This segment was brought to you by Brute Cattle Equipment, makers of the Brute Stealth Hydraulic Chute. If the chute fits, swear by it. Visit our website for more information.
The Kansas State University College of Veterinary Medicine is a leader in food animal research and education. Our researchers are constantly expanding the knowledge of animal health and food safety. Through the Veterinary Health Center and the Kansas State Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, we provide practical services for animal producers. Home of the Beef Cattle Institute, the college is committed to animal welfare training and research. The Kansas State University College of Veterinary Medicine, knowledge and service for the future of animal production.
Got cattle? Rotomix manufactures a complete line of energy-efficient rotary and vertical feed mixers for feedlots, beef production, dairy, and cow-calf operations. Our mixers are available with the patented Generation 2 staggered rotor, the industry standard for feeding wet rations that include wet distiller's grain. Made in the USA, Rotomix mixers are designed for feeding performance that American cattlemen and dairy producers have come to expect. Rotomix, proud to offer a better mix in less time using less fuel.
There's something wrong. His head is down. He's clearly stressed. He's worried sick about BRD. That's why there's prescription Zactran for BRD treatment and control in high-risk cattle. Get a rapid response plus 10-day treatment and control in a single dose, so you can stop worrying and get back to business. For use in cattle only, do not treat cattle within 35 days of slaughter. Because a discard time in milk has not been established, do not use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older or in calves to be processed for veal. The effects of Zactran on bovine reproductive performance, pregnancy, and lactation have not been determined. Don't worry yourself sick. Talk to your veterinarian about a real alternative for BRD treatment and control. Because it's critical, it's Zactran from Mariel, a leading animal health company.
This segment is brought to you by Lalaman Animal Nutrition, dedicated to the development and production of natural and differential solutions for animal nutrition.
Hi there and welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thompson here with Dr. Dion Funder-Merva, and he is a toxicologist and head of our toxicology section here at the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab at K-State. And as we left for break, you were discussing some of the toxins that can build up in our good plants.
Right, and of primary concern there is nitrate.
Sure.
Nitrate is a normal nutrient for plants. It's actually one of the main forms in which they make use of nitrogen for growth. So they take up nitrate normally from the soil, from the water in the soil, and that in a normal situation gets metabolized and they form proteins and other molecules like DNA that they need to grow and thrive. What happens though in a situation where the plant is unable to grow properly? For example, if it is drought-stricken, it can't produce those proteins anymore. So it can't make use of the nitrate in the normal way, and that causes accumulation of the nitrate because the plant tends to still keep on pumping nitrate from the soil into its system.
What are the types of plants that are most prone to nitrate?
That's another very good question because not all plants are prone to accumulate high levels of nitrate. And unfortunately, one of the things that we do when we breed plants to grow very rapidly and grow very vigorously and tall and strong is we breed into them the capacity to accumulate a lot of nitrogen.
Sure.
For growth. So a lot of the crop plants that we have bred to be high production are prone to also accumulate a lot of nitrate. Apart from those, you also see a lot of weed species that tend to accumulate nitrate. So it's once you have a situation where you have lots of weeds, like you have very often in a drought situation, you have a potential for problems, and then also the crops.
And the crop residues.
And then
we're going to see a lot of people bailing that.
Exactly.
This year.
So what happens if you harvest a plant in a state in which it has high levels of nitrate, which typically would be the case if it is drought stressed at the time that you harvest it, or cut it for silage or hay or whatever the case might be, that nitrate will remain in that plant tissue. So even if you make it into a hay and you use that hay even several months later during the winter, it can still be toxic.
I hear some people say that, well, we're going to turn we chop the hay or chop the corn and we're going to turn them out on the stalks, and the stalks probably shouldn't have any nitrate in it. Is what I hear. Is that true or is that false?
Well, to some extent it is true. It is not that the stalks don't contain a lot of nitrate, but it is because animals selectively eat mostly the leaf material, depending on what the plant species is and what the animals are used to. But if animals don't eat the stems of the plants, they are less likely to consume a lot of nitrate.
It's more concentrated in the stems.
It's more concentrated in the stems.
Perfect. Great information. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about aflatoxin with Dr. Dion. You're watching DocTalk, and we're sure glad you joined us.
This tip brought to you by Baytril 100 Enrofloxacin Injectable, now approved for use in controlling BRD in high-risk cattle. Baytril 100, right the first time, whether it's controlling BRD in high-risk cattle or treating BRD.
Hi there, it's Dr. Dan with an on-the-farm tip. Today we're going to talk about receiving pen management for those high-risk calves. Nothing aggravates me more than to have a load of calves come into a feeding facility and our receiving pen is not prepared. What I'm talking about with preparation of that pen, first of all, is cattle comfort and a place to lay down. If there's mud in the pen, we want to make sure we take the box blade one lap, give those cattle a place to lay down, or supply bedding. Another thing, a tip that we need to make sure we provide ample water supply and make sure that we have good long stem hay in the bunk for those calves. That's your On the Farm tip. I'm Dr. Dan, and thanks for joining us.
With BRD, every second counts. And when you get new high-risk cattle, you've got a choice to make. You can either take your chances and wait and see what happens, or you can take charge of BRD. Right from the start, treat bacteria up front with Baytril 100 Enrofloxacin Injectable, now approved by the FDA for BRD metaphylaxis and high-risk cattle. Ask your veterinarian about Baytril 100 and make it your go-to drug to control BRD in high-risk cattle or for treatment of BRD. Baytril 100, right the first time.
Hi, I'm Kevin Ochsner, host of NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman and Colorado Rancher. Join me each week as the National Cattlemen's Beef Association brings you the latest updates in industry information and market news. Plus, each week we provide important educational information and features on cattlemen from across the country just like you. And we can't forget our favorite cowboy poet, Baxter Black. Join me for NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman, debuting Tuesday nights at 8:30 Eastern, right here on RFD TV.
Beef producers need a practical choice when antibiotic therapy is required. More than ever, they are reaching for non-prescription Noromycin 300 LA from Norbrook, specially formulated to produce sustained antibiotic blood levels up to 4 days in cattle. Noromycin 300 LA delivers economic, broad-spectrum disease management for pneumonia, shipping fever, pink eye, wound infections, and foot rot. See for yourself why Norbrook's Noromycin 300 LA is the practical choice for your herd. Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
This segment is brought to you by Norbrook Laboratories, manufacturers of Noromycin LA, Normectin Plus, 1%, and Poron, the practical choice for your herd. Hi there and welcome back to Doc Talk. Dr. Dan Thompson here with Dr. Dion Funder-Merva, who is a toxicologist here in the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. And we're discussing things that are associated toxicology-wise with plants that we feed and plants we don't want to feed in a drought year. And we talked about nitrate toxicity and nitrate buildup in plants, but what about aflatoxin? That's one that you'd mentioned during break that can be an issue.
Aflatoxin actually is one of those things that you typically associate with drought conditions, especially in grains like corn. The reason is that the plant loses its ability to effectively fend off the fungus that causes the production of aflatoxin during drought stress. So when you have drought conditions, you have a much higher risk of having problems with aflatoxin. And that, in fact, is what we are seeing this year. With the drought, we also see more and more problems, more and more samples come in that test positive for high levels of aflatoxin.
What are some of the levels as far as aflatoxin that are dangerous for animals?
Aflatoxin is one of those poisons that is extremely potent. So very low levels of aflatoxin, relatively speaking to other types of things that we typically deal with, are a problem. We are dealing with aflatoxin in the range of parts per billion when we talk about aflatoxin problems. And depending on what the situation is, what the type of animal is that's involved, the situation in which it is used, different levels are used as sort of rules of thumb for cutoff of when it will be appropriate to use material or not. For example, if you are feeding cattle, which are just for beef production, just meat production, they are not being used as a reproductive animal. Then you can feed aflatoxin levels up to about 300 parts per billion.
Okay.
If it is a reproductive animal, though, then that level drops to about 100 parts per billion.
Wow.
And then, in general, as the default level at which people are concerned about feeding aflatoxin, 20 parts per billion is the default value. So unless you have specific conditions under which you may feed more, such as feeding cattle, 20 parts per billion is the cutoff point under which, above which you should not be using that as feed.
And if you do have it above, then you need to find a source that's below to blend. Is that a recipe for success?
Right, that is an option. So it depends. If you are at a level which is very close to that decision point, it may be feasible to dilute that out. And it just depends on conditions. If you have a material that is very high in aflatoxins, it may not be possible. And that is something that an individual case will be decided. It's not something that you can make a blanket statement about. But in many cases, that might be the best way to go about it, to still be able to get some use out of the material.
Work with a toxicologist or work with your veterinarian and
you
come up with some great information. It's something that I know that we're going to see a lot of this year. When we come back from break, we'll continue our discussion. Sound good?
Yep, thank you.
You're watching DocTalk, and we're sure glad you joined us.
This is Agriculture Today from Kansas State University. Seed-borne diseases like common bunt are becoming more problematic for Kansas wheat growers. That's why K-State wheat disease specialist Eric D. Wolf is promoting the use of fungicide seed treatments at wheat planting time this fall.
I often will encourage growers to be considering these fungicide seed treatments in the fall, particularly for growers that have production practices that lend themselves to saving seed, primarily because one of the main purposes of that is to prevent some seed-borne diseases like common bunt, oftentimes called stinking smut, that can build up to high levels and cause rejections of loads of grain when it's delivered.
Another example of what's happening in agriculture today from K-State Research and Extension.
We've been here for 42 years now. We run around 2,500 cows. I bought a couple loads of cattle out of cows, black cows out of California. I noticed these cows are kind of a off-color, rusty color. We're going to be processing these cows in the next few days, and at that time I will inject multimin into them to help take care of their copper deficiency. I would recommend multimin to any cowman. It's been effective.
Cow-calf, stocker, and feedlot producers know that effective parasite control improves overall herd performance and profitability. Norbrook offers a comprehensive, economical line of pour-on and injectable parasiticides for every livestock operation. Consult with your local animal health supplier to set up a program that protects your investment and brings larger cattle checks this fall. See for yourself why the Noromectin line from Norbrook is the practical choice for your herd.
If our local animal agriculture industry disappeared, what else would disappear? The buses that get us to school? The playgrounds and ballparks we go to after school? The books and computers that help us learn and grow? Animal agriculture provides millions of dollars in tax revenue that pay for our school improvements, that pave the foundation that will build our future. A message from U.S. soybean farmers and their checkoff.
This segment is brought to you by Rotomix, manufactured in the USA and designed for feeding performance in the feedlots, beef production, dairy, and cow-calf operations. Hi there and welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thompson here with Dr. Dion Funder-Merva. And Dr. Funder-Merva, you are a toxicologist here, the head of our toxicology section at Kansas State University's diagnostic laboratory, and we're sure glad you joined us. We always have fun having you on the show, and great information.
I have fun being here.
and we've talked about some of the serious conditions that this drought's going to bring forward, and things that people need to be looking at, whether it's nitrates in crop residues and toxic plants, and then also issues with aflatoxin. But I think one thing maybe we ought to touch on is, you're receiving samples, and I'm sure you get some samples you're like, geez, I wish they'd have done this or done that. But what are some general rules of thumb of sending in samples, and what do you want us to send in?
Well, I think as the most basic principle that somebody who's taking samples should apply is that you should realize that the answer that you get back from the laboratory, the quality of that answer is going to depend on the quality of the sample that gets sent in. So if you don't send in an appropriate sample, you're going to get an inappropriate answer back. And unfortunately, the laboratory does not have control over that.
Right.
So it's really important to just take a step back and think about how you should take the sample. And again, as a principle, what you should try and do is imagine how that material is going to be utilized by the animal or by people, if you're going to sell it or whatever the case might be. So if a material is going to be used to feed animals,
right,
you should think about what parts of that material and in what way will it be utilized by animals. So you can imagine if you have a field, an animal typically will walk around and feed in different areas. So it's unlikely that an animal feeding in a field will eat only from one spot.
Right.
They tend to move around.
So maybe take multiple samples.
So take multiple samples. Try to replicate the behavior of the animal in terms of its feeding behavior. Another factor is also to take adequate amounts of sample. So it's very important that you get sub-samples from different areas, and that you combine enough of those sub-samples so that the answer that you get at the end of the day, if you're looking for an average, that it is an average that's going to be representative. So there are various ways of approaching this, but I would like to see at least 5 to 10 sub-samples combined to represent a field, for example. The exact amount that you take will depend on the type of material. If it's a fine material, you can have smaller samples. If it's a coarse material, you need bigger samples. But if you're taking samples of corn, for example, I would suggest that you have about 1 pound of material as a minimum. But more is typically better.
More is better. Well, thanks for being on the show today. Thanks for supplying great information. If you want to know more about what Dr. Fundermerva and myself do here at the College of Veterinary Medicine, you can find us on the web at www.vet.ksu.edu. And remember, always work with local practitioners, something we always recommend that everybody does. We sure appreciate you watching DocTalk. I'm Dr. Dan Thompson here from the College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University, and I'll see you down the road.
For more information about this program or previous programs, go to DocTalkTV.com. DocTalk was brought to you by Multimin USA, manufacturers of Multimin 90, sure trace mineral supplementation by timed injection.
There are 2 problems with trace mineral intake in beef cattle. One is simply that intake of trace minerals can be slightly unpredictable. The second thing is that other minerals that are present in the diet in high proportions can actually interfere with trace mineral absorption. Sulfur is a classic example of this problem. Many of the feedstocks we use, like distiller's grain and corn gluten feed, are high in sulfur. In some cases, groundwater and surface water in Kansas can be high in sulfur. When dietary intake of sulfur is high, that means that copper in particular, and also possibly zinc, can be absorbed from the gut in less than ideal proportions. When injecting a trace mineral product, you bypass that source of trace mineral antagonism in the gut, because the injected product is taken directly into the circulatory system for processing in the liver and deposition in the various storage sites within the body. A breeding female's body reserves for trace minerals are a little bit like a bank account. When there are periods of demand in that breeding female's life, her bank account of trace minerals is rapidly consumed. I mean, two examples of critical physiological periods of need would include parturition, lactation, and then breeding that immediately follows the initiation of lactation. During these periods of time, the breeding female's body reserves of critical trace minerals are being constantly drawn down. In my opinion, the use of Multimin 90 allows a producer the option of assisting a beef female to perform at her genetic optimum through an optimized trace mineral nutrition program. It's possible to incorporate Multimin 90 treatment in conjunction with other health protocols such as vaccination for respiratory disease and clostridial diseases.